In a continent rich with culture, beauty, and hope, war still burns in the shadows. From the desert of Sudan to the jungles of Congo, from the quiet villages of Cameroon to the broken cities of Libya, millions live in fear, trapped in battles they never started. Young men with guns instead of dreams. Mothers fleeing homes built by generations. Children born into fear before they ever learn to speak. But why? Who is fighting? What fuels these flames? And why do these wars keep coming back? Today, we count down the top 10 most powerful wars in Africa, the hidden causes, the human cost, and the brutal truth in 2025. This is not just news, it's a wake-up call. Stay with us. What you're about to see, they don't show on your local news. We begin our countdown at number 10. In the heart of West Africa lies Nigeria, Africa's most populated nation and one of its strongest economies. But behind the power and potential, a silent war rages on. Since 2009, the country has been battling one of the deadliest terrorist groups in modern history, Boko Haram. Based in the northeast, this extremist group has bombed churches, attacked villages, kidnapped schoolgirls, and left thousands dead. Their goal: to establish an Islamic caliphate and destroy Western education. But Boko Haram is not the only threat. In the northwestern states, a new wave of terror has emerged: armed bandits. The Nigerian government, despite its massive army, has struggled to control both Boko Haram and the bandits. Trust in the military is low, and many civilians feel abandoned. The impact is devastating: over 3 million people displaced, thousands killed, and entire regions now too dangerous to farm, live, or go to school. At number 9, we move to the Horn of Africa, Somalia, a nation caught in a war that has lasted for over 3 decades. A country once full of promise, now struggles to stand under the weight of violence, poverty, and a powerful insurgent group known as Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab, meaning the youth in Arabic, is a jihadist militant group linked to Al-Qaeda. Since 2006, they have waged a brutal war against the Somali government and its allies, including African Union peacekeepers and the United States. Their aim is to establish a strict form of Islamic law and control the country through fear. From car bombings in Mogadishu to assassinations of politicians, Al-Shabaab has spread terror across Somalia and beyond. Even neighboring Kenya has felt their wrath, with deadly attacks on malls, schools, and public places. In 2025, they control large parts of southern and central Somalia. Schools are shut. The government in Mogadishu barely controls the capital, and peace seems far out of reach. At number 8, we turn to Africa's youngest nation, South Sudan. Born in 2011 after decades of bloody struggle, South Sudan's independence brought hope to millions. But that hope was short-lived. Just 2 years later, in 2013, civil war erupted, not between nations, but within the new nation itself. A political rivalry between President Salva Kiir and his former deputy, Riek Machar, turned into an ethnic conflict that split the country along tribal lines. The fighting was brutal. Villages were burned. Children were forced to fight. Thousands were raped and 2 million displaced. Over 400,000 people killed since independence. And hunger, disease, and trauma continue to haunt the population. If peace is not protected, if justice and reconciliation are not made real, South Sudan may fall back into full-scale war. The dreams of a new nation could vanish. And the world's youngest country could become its most forgotten. At number 7, we journey to southeastern Africa, to Mozambique, a country known for its coastline, culture, and natural wealth. But in its northern province of Cabo Delgado, a deadly insurgency has turned paradise into a war zone. Since 2017, Islamist militants locally known as Al-Shabaab, not connected to the Somali group, have waged a violent campaign in this resource-rich region. They target villages, decapitate civilians, burn homes, and drive families into the forest with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Their message is brutal. Their methods are unforgivable. The insurgents first appeared after years of neglect and poverty in the region. While multinational companies discovered massive offshore gas reserves, local people remained poor, unemployed, and unheard. Extremists filled the gap with promises and terror. By 2020, the violence had escalated beyond control. Towns were seized. Thousands fled. In response, Mozambique called for help, and Rwandan troops and Southern African Development Community (SADC) forces arrived. Together, they pushed back the militants. In 2025, much of the territory has been retaken, but the threat is not over. The insurgents are now hiding, regrouping, and launching surprise attacks. The impact remains severe, over 4,000 people killed. More than 1 million displaced. Entire communities still living in fear, unable to return home, unable to trust the peace. And Cabo Delgado could remain a battleground, not only for gas and land, but for hearts and minds left abandoned for too long. In northern Mozambique, silence is not peace, and peace is not yet victory. At number 6, we move north, to Libya, a country once considered one of the wealthiest in Africa, now shattered by a decade of chaos. In 2011, Libyan dictator Muammar Gaddafi was overthrown and killed in a popular uprising backed by NATO. But instead of peace and democracy, Libya fell into pieces. Today, Libya is a country with two rival governments, one based in the east, the other in the west, both claiming legitimacy. Surrounded by militias, tribes, foreign mercenaries, and oil rivalries, the nation is torn apart. Peace talks come and go, but violence never truly ends. In 2025, there is still no national election. The people are tired. The youth are frustrated. Libya's vast oil wealth is controlled by whoever holds the guns, not the people who need it. In Libya, the war is not always loud, but it never really stops. At number 5, we arrive in Ethiopia, a country with ancient history, proud identity, and great regional power. But in recent years, Ethiopia has also become a land of deep wounds and deadly division. The conflict began in November 2020, when tensions exploded between the Tigray People's Liberation Front (TPLF) and the federal government led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. What began as a political disagreement over autonomy turned into a brutal war that shocked the world. Towns were bombed. Civilians massacred. Tigray was cut off from food, electricity, and medicine. Eritrean troops joined the war. Allegations of war crimes, rape, and ethnic cleansing echoed from all sides. A peace agreement was signed in November 2022, and fighting stopped officially. But in 2025, the aftershock of that war still shakes the country. Tigray remains deeply wounded. Tensions continue in other regions, especially Amhara and Oromia, where new conflict and armed groups have emerged. Displacement, trauma, and mistrust dominate the landscape. The federal government struggles to unify a nation torn by ethnicity, history, and political ambition. The impact is deep and lasting, over 600,000 people estimated dead, according to some reports. Millions displaced. Whole regions still suffering from famine and lack of basic services. And a sense of national unity shattered. If healing does not happen, if justice, truth, and inclusion are not pursued, Ethiopia may face more fragmentation, more uprisings, and more sorrow. This is not just a conflict that happened. It is a wound that continues to bleed beneath the surface. And for Ethiopia, the war may be over, but the peace has not yet begun. At number 4, we turn to Central Africa, Cameroon. The Anglophone crisis began when the English-speaking regions of northwest and southwest Cameroon demanded greater autonomy and respect for their language and culture. For decades, these regions felt marginalized by the Francophone-dominated central government. Peaceful protests turned violent as the government cracked down hard, arresting leaders, shutting down schools, and banning groups. In response, some English-speaking activists formed armed groups demanding independence for a new state called Ambazonia. The result is a bloody conflict that has torn communities apart. Villages burned. Civilians caught in the crossfire. Journalists jailed or killed. Schools closed for years. Over 3,000 killed. More than 700,000 internally displaced and refugees fleeing to Nigeria. a generation of children growing up without education. For many, the Anglophone crisis is a forgotten war, but for those living it, it is a daily nightmare. At number 3, we enter the vast and fragile Sahel region, a semi-arid belt stretching across West and Central Africa, where a deadly insurgency has shaken the very foundations of multiple nations. Since 2012, Islamist militant groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS have exploited weak governments, ethnic tensions, and poverty to spread terror across Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. These groups attack military bases, kidnap civilians, bomb marketplaces, and kill without mercy. The roots of this war are complex. In recent years, the situation worsened after military coups in Mali and Burkina Faso, which undermined efforts to fight terrorism. In 2023, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso formed the Alliance of Sahel States, cutting ties with the West African regional bloc ECOWAS, and increasingly aligned with Russia's Wagner mercenaries for military support. Over 30,000 lives lost since 2012. More than 5 million displaced across the Sahel. Hundreds of thousands face hunger, disease, and trauma. At number 2, we enter the dense forest and hills of Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, a region plagued by conflict for decades. The latest chapter in this long saga is the resurgence of the rebel group M23, which reignited fighting in 2022 after years of relative calm. M23 claims to defend the rights of the Tutsi minority and fights against what it calls government neglect and abuse. However, the conflict is complicated by accusations against neighboring Rwanda, which the Congolese government and some international observers accuse of backing M23 as a proxy to control mineral-rich areas. Rwanda denies direct involvement but acknowledges historic ties with Tutsi communities in eastern Congo. The causes run deeper: competition over vast mineral resources, ethnic tensions, and regional power struggles have fueled the flames of war. Porous borders allow armed groups to move freely. The impact on civilians is catastrophic. Villages are attacked and looted. Thousands have been killed or displaced. Food insecurity and disease worsen as humanitarian aid struggles to reach remote areas. In 2025, the situation remains unstable. The United Nations peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO, is scaling down after nearly 2 decades, leaving a security vacuum. The Congolese army struggles to control vast territories. If peace is not restored soon, Eastern Congo risks falling back into full-scale war. Regional tensions could escalate, drawing in Rwanda, Uganda, and other neighbors. Millions more civilians could suffer the consequences. And finally, at number 1, the most powerful and devastating conflict in Africa today, the Sudan Civil War. In April 2023, Sudan, a nation once moving cautiously toward democracy, plunged into brutal fighting between two military giants, the Sudanese Armed Forces (SAF), led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the Paramilitary Rapid Support Forces (RSF), commanded by General Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemedti. These two groups had once cooperated in the 2021 coup that overthrew Sudan's civilian government, but deep rivalries over control of the army and the country exploded into open warfare. Battles rage across Khartoum, Darfur, and other regions, turning cities into war zones. Hospitals, schools, and markets have been destroyed. Civilians are caught in the crossfire, facing killings, sexual violence, starvation, and displacement. The human toll is staggering: over 14,000 people killed and more than 8 million displaced internally or as refugees in neighboring countries. Sudan's infrastructure lies in ruins. Aid agencies struggle to reach those in need. In 2025, the war shows no sign of stopping. Ceasefires have failed repeatedly. International efforts to negotiate peace have stalled. Sudan risks collapse into failed statehood, with regional instability threatening neighboring countries like South Sudan, Chad, and Egypt. If this conflict continues, the consequences will be catastrophic, not just for Sudan, but for the entire region. The wars we've explored today are not just battles over land or power, they are struggles over identity, justice, and survival. But there is hope. Hope in the courage of those who refuse to give up. Hope in the voices calling for peace, unity, and healing. Hope in the generations who dream of a continent free from war. Best regards.